You're listening to Making Data Simple, where we make the world of data effortless, relevant, and yes, even fun.
So welcome back to Making Data Simple. Al Martin here. This is the podcast where we, as the title says, we work to make data simple, accessible, and ready for AI. I'm glad to be with you today. Today we have a topic of using data for price optimization. And I promise, or we promise, we're going to make that seem cool. So stay tuned. And the guest I have today is cool. His name is Dan Nichols. He is an analytics client architect for the U.S. distribution market for IBM. Welcome, Dan. I'm glad to have you here.
Thank you, Alex. Excited to join you.
So rather than me introduce you further, I'll just let you introduce yourself, and you can share your role with IBM, and we'll use that as a kickoff point to go into greater things.
Awesome, thanks. So as you mentioned, I'm an analytics architect with IBM and for North America distribution. So I work with retailers, consumer goods manufacturers, logistics, and I focus a lot on our data science and business analytics solutions, so things like Watson Studio, decision optimization, planning, and cognitive analytics, with some work in our data management and governance solutions as well.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. So we're going to talk about data and price optimization today, as I started with. A couple things that I wanted to kind of set the stage with, and that is, according to McKinsey, on average, 1% of a price increase results in 8.7% increase in operating profits, assuming no loss of volume. I presume that it applies to, I don't know if it applies to every segment or not, but it's still worth stating that fact. The other thing is 30% of pricing decisions companies make every year fail to deliver the best price. And that came from McKinsey and Company as well. So that's the criticality of what we're dealing with here in driving or using data for price optimization. So jumping right in, tell us a little bit about your background in the area of pricing and optimization.
Prior to joining IBM, I worked with IRI's strategic analytics consulting team. So along with due diligence and assortment analytics, I spent a lot of time working with revenue management and IT pricing. So I worked with companies like Hormel, Pfizer, Purdue Chicken, Pepsi, a number of major manufacturers around how they approach pricing and taking their transactional data and actually turning it into insights they can manage their products from a price perspective on and ultimately drive results for their business.
So if I look at this, I'm probably getting ahead of myself in terms of talking about technology, but this would seem like a true big data challenge. I mean, capturing data, data storage, data analysis, cleansing data, privacy, sharing data, visualization, the whole gamut. And it would include data science, machine learning model to help with pricing. You tell me, I mean, is that what we're talking about here? Is that to the level that you get involved with these pricing optimizations, or am I off base?
No, you're absolutely correct. I think depending on the company, right, everyone prices something, whether you're in services, whether you're making toothbrushes, right, you have to set a price for your product. And in today's market, we have transactional data and other influential factors that you can collect and catalog and understand. You can then start to use analytics to drive better pricing decisions. Are you familiar with the website Rue La La?
Rue La La? No, I'm not.
So I was not until I recently got engaged. The Rue La La is kind of like Groupon, right? It's a members-only shopping site that leverages flash sales. So they can sell you anything from accessories, brand name clothing, designer shoes. As you can see, my fiance obviously likes it for a lot of reasons. So she introduced it to me, and I got really curious. How do they price their products? I got even more lucky that MIT has published some research on a partnership they had around how they approach pricing. In the old days, the way that Rue La La would leverage any pricing strategy is cost plus, right? They'd buy a product, and they'd throw 60% on there, and they'd put it out there and sell it. And they quickly ran into a big problem. They would either, A, they would sell a product they'd never seen before, and it would sell out instantly, meaning, maybe they left some money on the table, did they not price it appropriately, or they'd run into the opposite problem, right? They'd price it, put it out there, and 10 hours later, they'd have 60% of their inventory left. So how do you do that? How do you approach building some sort of a solution that you can then price an item you've never had historical sales for? So what Rue La La did was they actually then took all their transactional data, they cataloged it, they stored it, and they analyzed it, and they broke it into two kind of dynamics. They looked first at, let's look at the sales where we sold out, right? Let's understand the dynamics and the pricing elements that manifest themselves there, and let's apply that learning to the sales where we didn't sell out. And from that, they started to create the right coefficients, the right way to approach a pricing solution that they then they implemented, they deployed, they let it run for 6 months to test and learn. And when they finally put it in production, can you guess what their top line impact was?
I have no idea. Give it to me.
It beat McKinsey's estimate, and they grew their sales by 10%, as well as delivered bottom line results with that.
So that's kind of my question. I got to believe there's a growth of 10%. Is that, what are we talking here? Is that additional sales, or is GP separate and they increase their top line? I mean, could you explain that further?
Yeah, absolutely. So in this case, the cited statistic was that they recognized a 10% increase in revenue. They didn't publish what the bottom line results were, but again, it really is a depending variable on how much your variable costs are, right? So if you imagine a 10% increase, you might see a volume decline, which is expected, but is that increase in price going to offset that and deliver the bottom line results, which is very common, a story that retailers and consumer goods companies realize as well.
Yeah, because I've got some more questions I want to ask you about this, and some of it deals with, I know we're talking about data for price optimization, but I think that price optimization can also, or that analysis of data for price optimization would also lead to cost optimization within the company. At least I would think it would. So then you're going to increase, or you're going to promote your overall profit in the end.
Absolutely, and I think when you think about like commodity costs, a lot of organizations are investing both understanding how to order more efficiently based on seasonal trends, or based perhaps on quantity of volume ordered by competitors. And if they can get an insight into that, they can start to then time how they procure their products different ways as well.
Yeah, nice. Hey, so I'm looking at my producer, Kate, right now. Do you know Rue La La? Say yes or no. She doesn't know it either. So I'm not the only one. What about you, Liam? No, all right. So we're learning something today.
Yeah, I was just going to chime in. Hi, everyone. This is Kate. So, no, I had not heard of it, though I Googled it while you've been talking. So I've seen it now, and it does look pretty interesting. Definitely something I'd check out.
I get some email from some Groupon, I don't know, some Groupon company every so often, and it's pretty good deals, but I've never been motivated to actually take the next step and get something. Shame on me, I guess. Anyway, good example. So this is probably a good time. I want to get your definition of what we're doing here for data and price optimization. My definition is analyzing data to identify the right products or services or offerings based on different channels, which could be digital, traditional, partners even, and then using business models to calculate demand and determine the optimal price, probably at using different pricing levels. So let me stop there. How did I do?
I think you did exceptionally well.
Yeah, good. I can pat myself on the back now. So when you're looking, well, anything you want to add or you want to subtract from that, or elaborate on?
The one I would elaborate on is the level. I think one thing I commonly run into is you get a data science organization that starts to tackle, whether it be pricing or even just like something as simple as predictive maintenance. The level in the organization that you're building and deploying this model, this insight, whatever you want to call it, is the key to success. And if you aren't building your analytics or looking at the data at the right level, the decisions you make off of that are going to be moot for your business.
So what is the right level?
Where the decisions get made.
Yeah, but so I presume that where the decisions get made don't necessarily mean where the decision analysis, or what I want to say, the analytics and the data science is done. So you have to have, how do you bridge that gap is the question.
So there's two ways. One, you ideally will just build that model at the right level. Or two, you always approach it by being as granular as possible so then you can aggregate back up to that level where you want to make the decision.
So let me ask you, with your experience, are you doing both cloud, on-prem, and I guess one of the questions I have, and if you're not in this space, that's fine, are you doing pricing analysis, transitioning from on-prem to the cloud, or is that kind of separate from this discussion?
It's a tad separate from the discussion. I will answer where I'm seeing it within IBM. It does tend to be cloud focused. And the only reason for that is a lot of organizations prefer to just have this be its own sort of standalone environment. They don't want to think about or deal with building some different environment on-prem to then run this. And also a lot of times they're bringing in partners or external consultants to build the models themselves. And that just makes things a lot easier if you have a separate dedicated environment that you can do all of that.
So is it all business to business? Is it B2B or B2C or both?
Both. My experience is more heavily in the B2C, right? Thinking about the retail space. But I have worked and seen some dynamics in the B2B space, thinking like a trucking company bidding out routes. One project I've been working on is they ask the question, well, when we bid out a route and the price is accepted, we capture that information. But when we bid out a route and somebody turns down that price, we don't get that. So they actually are looking to use a Watson solution to collect these phone calls, convert that into data so they can start building analytics off of that.
That brings the question of what type of data are we analyzing? Because I think you've got costs, you got inventory, you got historical prices. It could be any sector. I mean, obviously, I think you're talking about the retail sector. But is it across the entire software S-curve, which is essentially, performance against time? And I guess one example I'd have of this is Apple seems to have mastered this, the pricing equation, at least to date, with their phones. Because right now, you can get a phone, but it's getting longer in the tooth with the S-curve, meaning you get better battery life, camera, but the phones keep coming, the reliability is getting better, that kind of thing. But now you can see them issuing pricing and optimization in their portfolio. They've got old phones that are still out, like they got 2 previous year models, I think, now with the new announcement. They've got the new phones, of course. Now they got multiple memory sizes. They got new just overall screen sizes. They got 6 colors. And it seems that, obviously you're doing this to make money, right? They're doing this in terms of price optimization. And the beauty of what they're doing, and I'd like you to comment on this, the beauty of what it seems that they're doing is that when you talk to somebody about an iPhone, they just say, what iPhone do you have? They don't go into how much memory they have or the different model. They've made it still simple enough that they say, hey, look, I got an iPhone 8, I've got an iPhone X, whatever the case may be. I mean, is that a testament to pricing optimization and what businesses need to drive to achieve success?
To a certain extent, absolutely. I'll kind of answer it in 2 ways, right? One is, how do you understand pricing? And in the simplest level, right, it's elasticity, right? You're understanding when I change my price, what happens to the associated demand or volume. And by measuring that, we get an elasticity. And of course, if we get super granular, we can see things like price thresholds and gaps, et cetera. But what a lot of organizations, especially from when you're really focused on the numbers and the actual analysis, they forget that there are other factors that really influence that elasticity. And so you just laid out so many of the factors that contribute to the fact that an iPhone is an inelastic product, right? It's highly differentiated from its competition because of its operating system. The iPhone is the only phone that has iOS, right? Huge, huge, huge levels of loyalty, right? How many people leave their iPhone to go somewhere else? It's not many, right? Think about their investment in advertising. When was the last time you didn't see an Apple commercial or ad somewhere throughout your day? I would challenge someone to not see one within a week. Right, so all of these factors play into that very, very inelastic product. And if you want to get even more technical, right, if you count an iPhone as a luxury good, right, price is now actually an attribute that is equated to quality. So if you lower price, you might lose this perception of quality. But that's a separate topic as well.
So do you think if you're an enterprise, where do you find the best pricing optimization after you've done the models? Meaning, do more SKUs, more part numbers, if you will, do they drive greater revenue when you're at enterprise level or less? Because kind of going back to the Apple example, I think I think they're kind of unique here is they manufacture the simplicity of, hey, I just got an iPhone 8, an iPhone X or whatever. Yet they've got to have at least 50 SKUs they're working with to try to promote and achieve the most level of, or the best pricing model possible. Yes? No? What do you think?
I mean, I hate to say it depends, but I'll take a different product category and we can talk about it. Think about when you go shopping for soap, right? There is a lot of effort in the soap aisle from the Unilevers, the P&Gs of the world to approach the category with what the industry would call a price pack architecture, right? They think about, right, if you've got Dove soap on the shelf and it's sitting next to Irish Spring, they've put a lot of thought and effort and analysis behind what's the gap of the price between these two products. And those are two companies, right, that have pretty extensive portfolios of products they put on shelf. And they think about, right, if I get somebody to go from a bar soap to a 6-pack bar soap, what incentive do I want to give them? And they've analyzed that. And they're actually going through and starting to optimize what those pricing ladders would be to incent people to trade up or to shift to a different price product. So that's an example where there's a lot within the portfolio, but there's some synergy there, right? And there's some power in protecting your core brand with a cheaper brand, right? Letting competition try to come in and having a price point that competes with the lower end competition. And so there's power in that as well.
So good. That's a good example as well. But, this is the point in the podcast where I could look at this and say price optimization could be termed by many as a paradigm to milk every cent out of the client. For those listening, is that accurate? Trick question, I guess.
It is. I'm trying to think of the best way to answer it.
That's what we're here to do. We're here to put you in an uncomfortable position.
I would say it not necessarily to milk every cent out of a customer, but to deliver on the goals of your organization, right? And I'm going to go into an example I'm going to stick with consumer goods, about where a sales organization's strategy may not be aligned with what your analysis is telling you. So in the perfect example, right, imagine if we saw evidence to say, well, if we increase our product by 5%, we'll actually see an operating income improvement of 8%. But if I go to my sales team and I talk to them and I say, hey guys, I can deliver 8% to our bottom line, increased price. And they say, oh, you know what, my incentive is tied to volume targets for this quarter. So there's no way I am going to increase price because that's going to hurt my paycheck at the end of the day, even though it helps the company. So what I would say is, well, certainly you could use price optimization to maximize every cent coming in. Successful organizations are leveraging price optimization to build synergy within the organization to drive that business result. So is it about building your market share, or is it about growing the largest volume to justify your product being on shelf, or is it about delivering the most money to the bottom line for this specific segment? Does that start to address that trick question?
Yeah, I think it goes back to my original question. In my research, and look, I'm not the expert, but in my research on pricing, I think, once you head down this path, you can look to explore reducing the cost in operational and production areas and activities, which in turn are going to help an offering become more competitive in pricing one way or another, or you're going to be able to maybe even keep pricing the same. You go down this path, you're optimizing pricing, you end up reducing operational or production costs, well then just gives you the same profit that you were looking for anyway, while keeping the price competitive and in line with client expectations. Does that make sense? So on my side, that's what I was kind of thinking. I got to believe there's some derivatives or derivative gains you get when you're looking or using data to optimize pricing.
There absolutely are those gains, and I think that makes perfect sense.
All right, good. So you said I was right. I always need that pick me up about this time. All right, thank you. So here's the other thing around pricing that I wanted to talk about. I got to believe, people are looking at probably direct pricing, but the real magic is in discount pricing. You mentioned that a little bit earlier. Marketing plays that you may have, and I think the challenge, and I'd like you to comment on this. I presume that the term is revenue management when demand is high, and markdown management when demand is low.
Potentially, yeah. I think it's very category dependent, right? And I'll add another example of bacon, right? Bacon is one of the most promoted categories in the grocery store. What impact does that have on your power to leverage price? Well, because it's so highly promoted, because there's so many competitors, and because there's a low purchase cycle, all of these factors, you've got a very elastic product, meaning you want to move volume, you're going to have to think about how your trade schedule and your promotional schedule tie into different times of year. And so, it's also where a lot of companies spend a ton of money. So understanding the dynamics, understanding where there's a specific price point that you might want to manage against is very, very important, right? Because that tells you, are you overpaying to get a certain volume gain, or are you not hitting a price point, you're missing out on huge gains? A lot of opportunities there for organizations to tackle price optimization and reap great rewards.
Okay, Dan, you just lost me. I'll tell you why. Who the hell needs to market bacon? Everybody likes bacon. I mean, you can raise that price through the roof and people still buy bacon, would they not? At least I would.
Walk through the aisle and you'll notice. Every time you go to the bacon section, you'll see. And ask my fiance, I'm the worst person to shop with because I spend too much time in stores and think about pricing. There's usually at least one, if not multiple products on sale, and they're almost always on sale, right? And when you spend this much time training people to expect that promotion, they're going to buy and stock up on it. And now all of a sudden you're seeing things like 70, 80% of your product's volume is being sold on promoted price versus its base price.
I thought everybody liked bacon. Kate, you like bacon? Liam, bacon? Everybody likes bacon, Dan. Come on, man. I don't know why they need to put that on sale all the time. We should investigate that as a separate podcast. Anyway.
But Al, if I can chime in again, it's Kate.
Yes.
I would say that bacon is something that is on my grocery list almost as an option. If I go and I can find it on sale and it's cheap enough, I'll buy it. If not, I'll leave it.
The pricing is a little bit incentive just to put you over the edge then.
Yeah. I'll grab it if I can get it for a deal, but I'll leave it behind. It's not an essential item in my house, at least. My husband might not like that, but I can certainly see that it would be something where if it was a great deal, it would be an incentive to a lot of consumers. All
right, I learned something today. Everybody loves bacon, but they're trying to will themselves away from it. So we're doing a price optimization, so they see that sale and they go, okay, I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna take the plunge. All right, so I learned something today. So Dan, without sophisticated tools, data scientists, I got to believe most of the pricing decisions are based on intuition, which is always a bad thing. But here's the thing today that I think you're challenged with is you got social media signals, you got point of sale history, you got accounts, reviews, you've got, you could record telephone conversations. There's data everywhere from supply chain to finance. That's where I say when I started this thing is I got to believe this is a huge big data problem, which makes it perfect for a Making Data Simple podcast, because I would think you'd be putting that structure and unstructured data into Hadoop. You'd be using like big SQL, like an IBM technology that queries Hadoop. This is the perfect case for volume, variety, and veracity. Yes, no, and give me some examples of what you're doing from a technology perspective.
Yes. Okay. So we're seeing a lot of organizations investing from a technology point of view. You hit the nail on the head with Hadoop. A lot of companies are just dumping transactional data in Hadoop, using some basic elasticity, generating basic elasticity, and then taking that and starting to understand how other campaigns can impact that, right? So if they invest in a social media campaign, they can measure that and understand it going forward, right? How does that social media campaign tie into their TV, tie into their promotional spending as well? So it's definitely a place where they're leveraging things like SPSS, Watson Studio, decision optimization to start to build when is the optimal time to invest in a based upon seasonality to invest in a promotion. Those are where I'm seeing the most technology coming out. Does that start to illustrate that, or do you want me to run it again?
No, I think that absolutely starts to illustrate it. But if you're capable, can you take it further in terms of give an example of the technology, the methodologies being used by any customer? I mean, by example, in terms of using big data to interpret and use analytics to come up with new pricing algorithms.
I'm going to use an example of a project I'm working on with a global shipping company, and there's two things they're trying to tackle in this initiative. The first, they're trying to optimally use their containers, right? They have this dynamic of they lease some containers, they own some, they have new orders coming in every day, and across all of their locations, right, how do they make decisions of where to put empty containers? And the second piece, right, is how do they start to charge for them, right? How do they incrementally charge based upon the dynamics they're facing? So there's a couple of pieces of technology they're using. The first is they're actually using planning analytics. And what they're using planning analytics for is actually to automate the equipment managers, right? All the people out in the field who are actually logging which containers are empty, which ones are not, which ones are out to customers. But before, this was a very manual process. So what they're doing with planning analytics is they're integrating it with how they're doing it in Excel so that it automatically updates everything in the corporate view. From there, they're building it into CPLEX or decision optimization to then optimally decide, okay, based upon the orders that are coming in, which is through their existing systems, and based upon this new level of insight and granular insight that they have for demand, what are the optimal decisions that can be made as far as where they want to put empty containers? Then with that, they have the other model being built right now to understand, based upon the costs and what they have coming in from their orders, what are the optimal orders to take and fulfill versus skip over, right? So it starts to help them make the decisions of what offer, what order is worth it for us as far as what revenue we're bringing in and the costs we have associated with that. And then it pushes the decision again to those equipment managers.
So are they putting their data into an Hadoop environment in this case, or are they using more traditional data stores, or do you know? And then are they using planning analytics, Watson analytics on top of it?
So in this scenario, they're using Watson analytics and planning analytics on top of their ordering system, as well as I believe it is a Hadoop environment, but they keep their historical transaction data that they're using to reference.
I think or virtualization technology that my team is currently working on as a plug would be very fitting here. But let's move on. So tell us about pricing flexibility. What is an example of a flexible versus inflexible price or pricing model? And does that lend itself to your definition of elasticity?
So I think we talked a little bit about with the iPhone being inelastic and bacon being highly elastic. So I'll answer it from a business model or operational perspective. And across my experience, I've come across sort of 4 capabilities in an organization, or I'll call it levels of sophistication. Right. The first level is reactive pricing. I think you talked about that a second ago, of how it's very intuition based. But really the key is, right, the organization, they change price based on some catalyst, right? You have a commodity cost, competition does something, right? It's just very reactive. And again, think about my story around Rue La La and where they started, or perhaps take what's happening on the East Coast in the hurricane, right? All of a sudden there's an expectation of demand and supply that changed dramatically, so gas stations just jack their prices up right away. The next sort of level of ability I've seen in organizations is what I would call scientific pricing, right? You're using some analytics, you're helping make better decisions, but really these are just discrete events versus an ongoing activity. The other characteristic I'd see in this, what I call scientific level, is there's just a disconnect between your field organization and what that corporate strategy on what pricing can be. And it's this level and the next level that most of the customers I work with, I'm seeing that they're sitting in. The third sort of level of capability is what I call strategic pricing, right? And this is where you've got a little bit more holistic, a more granular, and more kind of always-on approach. And this is oftentimes embedded with some sort of a software solution. So whether that's where you're storing your data, or more importantly, how you're making decisions off that data. But now you're starting to see the marrying of strategic and tactical perspectives enabling decision-making. And the kind of final level, and where I think most organizations strive to be, is in this what I call dynamic pricing level. And most people jump to, oh, well, that's like Uber, where they have surge charging, and I can't do that in my business. And while true, I would define surge charging as dynamic, what I really mean by dynamic pricing level would be that you've integrated decision making with with the analytics that you're running, right? And now you're using pricing to influence behavior. Again, the example I would use is actually just last night. I was purchasing some things from Amazon, and I noticed as I was checking out, they gave me the option to delay my delivery for an extra $5. Right there is a perfect example of how they've leveraged analytics and understood the impact that would have in their network to change my behavior. That's a great illustration of dynamic pricing in action.
I got most of those. I want to make sure the audience gets those, though. You started out with reactive pricing. I heard strategic pricing. Could you name those again real quick, just to make sure I'm taking notes as well?
Yeah, so reactive pricing, right, just something happens, you change your price. Scientific pricing, right, we take a stagnant view of the elasticities associated with our products, for example, or just a stagnant view of costing, and we just make decisions off of it, right? You're using something to help make better decisions, but it's not an always-on kind of approach. Mm-hmm. Scientific, being more holistic and more kind of granular, right? You're now using a comprehensive understanding, likely aided with some level of software support. But the key kind of characteristic here is you're starting to have your tactical, use of analytics and pricing match what that corporate strategy would be. And then the final level being that dynamic pricing, right? How can you seamlessly integrate the analytics with the decisions that are being made to actually influence behavior of your customers or of your businesses that you're working with?
There's 4 areas of pricing, which is reactive, scientific, strategic, and dynamic. Is it your premise that every client should have a strategy for each one of those?
These are the sort of levels of capability I'm seeing across customers and how I would define skill sets and competency by organization. And ideally, you want to move up the ladder.
Yeah, but so if I was, because I guess the question I have, though, Dan, is I could see a customer that could have reactive and strategic pricing, but you're saying, hey, it's one bucket or the other? You can't have more than one? Different pricing strategies for...
No. Oh, no.
Okay.
Certainly there's different capabilities within an organization. Imagining, right, if you've got a slowly fading product, you might not invest in the analytics, you might not invest in the technology needed to embed that capability within a part of the business. But from a capability standpoint, right, where does the business stand to gain the most? Is it in a kind of one-off analysis, or is it in this integrated decision-making dynamic pricing model? And I would argue that when you're in that dynamic space, right, you're now able to leverage pricing in a far more powerful way than in any of the other levels. But certainly organizations straddle different parts of that.
So you got to work your way up the flagpole here.
Exactly.
So look, is there anything, Dan, that we left unsaid as it relates to using data to optimize pricing? Because I do want to move on. I always I do a lightning round where I'm going to ask you some specific questions before we let you go. But I want to make sure you have the last word in terms of data for pricing optimization.
In the price optimization specific realm, I don't have a ton of the infrastructure, because so much of it is people bringing their own elasticity and wanting to build some sort of a what-if analysis solution via planning analytics. So they want to have some sort of an optimization element into, here's my trade budget, here's my margin, I want to just optimize my spend based upon these 5 factors and these constraints. There's not, at least in my experience, pricing as much around the ecosystem as much as there's around how do I take my model and deploy it, or how do I have a platform that I can do the following things in with the objective of pricing.
Is, one thing we didn't talk about much is machine learning or data science. Are you walking into a lot of data science around these optimization? I presume that the models that we're talking about would lend themselves to, it'd be a great technology or use of technology around data science, yes?
Oh, absolutely. And with that, the common challenges that data science organizations face, right? Once you've built this model and you've got it producing what you want, how do you deploy it? How do you measure it over time? And in the example with Rule, as I said, they trained that model for 6 months, but they actually started using it to build decisions off of. So very, very much when an organization wants to build or farm out the actual data science of building these coefficients around elasticity, et cetera, it requires the tool set to do so.
But what's the right timeline? I presume it's dependent on macroeconomics. It could be dependent on things going on in that specific sector, because depending on some macroeconomics, for example, the model could completely change. So I know, it's probably not to this level, but as I'm working with like stock machine learning algorithms, those things change almost daily.
Yep.
I have customers that are putting in algorithms at night to be ready for the next day, because the day before we've already made them obsolete, which is crazy. But that's the kind of pace that they're on. What kind of pace do you think the pricing optimization? I presume it depends on sector. I don't want to answer the question for you, but
no, it very much depends on sector, right? If you imagine something like K-Cup coffee and ground coffee in the store, right? You can build that model off of 2 years of data, because you've got pretty much the same set, the same dynamic, and you've got enough observations in price change to build an accurate model. And that's the key, right, is if you're trying to understand pricing dynamics, the data sets and the time frame you're looking at has to have enough variation for you to actually start to capture the impact of price changes. So in stocks, of course, right, how many transactions are happening in a day versus a 2-year time frame? That's incredibly important to understand how accurate you want. And we talked about that earlier, right? That level of where you want to make decisions, that's part of the factor that comes into how you want to build your model.
Fair enough. I think we've hit it. I think we've got it. Are you comfortable? I'm comfortable.
I'm comfortable if you are.
Yeah, I'm always comfortable. But I do got a few questions specifically for you that I always end on. It's called the lightning round. Are you game?
Sure.
All right, Dan. This is your life. No. First question is, can you spell Rulala? Because I hope I'm pronounced. Oh, I didn't even expect
R-U-E?
Yeah.
New word, L-A. New word, L-A.
Very nice. All right, now I know, because I would have left out the E. I'm going to have to look up this company now that you've mentioned it. So what are your passions, Dan? What else do you do when you're not doing pricing optimizations?
I love to read. I love to travel. I used to love to fish before I moved to Chicago. It's just now a little difficult to get out. And I'm a foodie at heart, so I enjoy the Chicago restaurant scene with my fiance as much as I can.
Well, hold on. I know Chicago has some lakes nearby. So you don't like that kind of fishing, or what?
No, I do. It's just it's difficult to get the rod and reel and get out there. Plus, I'm a baby when it comes to the winter. So once it gets below like 50, I tend to try to go visit family and friends.
That's called ice fishing, man. That's a different kind of fishing altogether.
Absolutely not.
I'm with you on that. So here's a tough one. Any good failures that you've learned from?
Oh, gosh. This one's not directly pricing related, but my favorite failure that I learned the most from was when I was working with Kimberly Clark around diapers. We were working on using transactional data and loyalty card data to advise on what is the optimal shelf set. And there's sort of two ways to tackle that, right? The first is you can look at an average over time, right, transactions to understand which attributes are more likely to be substitutable. Or you can look at that same dynamic, but look at it in a single point in time. And this is like one of the first projects I ever got to lead. So I chose to approach diapers with an average over time. And little did I know, having no kids, that, well, size is going to change a lot over 2 or 3 years. And so all of a sudden, right, when you see that many times people switch between sizes, it plummets to the bottom of being important as far as how people make a decision at the shelf. So I went in and presented my results to this team with probably a combined 100 years of diaper knowledge. And luckily they were very nice and forgiving. They said, Dan, no one is going to go from an infant-sized diaper to a toddler-sized diaper before they switch brands. So we might need to reapproach how we're doing this analysis.
Very good. Hey, what are you most proud of?
I wasn't ready for that one. I'm most proud that as of the last 2 years, I have reinvested in my passion of music, and I'm taking piano lessons, and I've stuck with it for about 2 years now.
Nice. That's good. That's a good one. See, good answer. All right, last question. Where do you learn? What are you reading today? You say you like to learn, or you like to read, you said.
I love to read. I just picked up the Papers of Thomas Edison. It's a really, really robust biography of the inventor, and there's 7 volumes, and it's really cool because it goes through and it pulls a lot of his patents and his competitors' patents, and it just goes through the history of how he approached, the problems he ended up solving it. And I just started it actually this past weekend, and I think it's fascinating.
That is, I'm gonna have to read that. One thing about Thomas Edison is that he was a good leader. He was a good marketer, and I often use this as a point in teaming, and that is most people think of Thomas Edison like working alone, working a light bulb or whatever, just going fanatic at it. But he had a team of great scientists, and he was corporately funded. Most people don't know that, and as a result, that's where he was able to achieve a lot. So it was about influence, but he had a team, and it's always a team that really makes things successful. So I think that's a good answer. Papers of Thomas Edison. I'll have to look those up. Look, thank you for joining us today. We had a great discussion. Where can the audience reach you if they wanted to touch base with you?
The best way to get in touch with me would be email, which is dan.nichols, Nickels, @ibm.com.
Are you on LinkedIn at all?
I am, yes.
All right, so look at Dan Nichols. We will put your LinkedIn in the show notes and make sure folks that can get a hold of you. So thank you so much. Great discussion. If you have any pricing comments, questions, concerns, please get that back to Dan. And meanwhile, thank you for listening as always. And whatever medium you're listening on, please give us some feedback. Let us know how we're doing. And until next time, I'll talk to you later. Let's make data simple. Talk to you.
Thanks for listening to the Making Data Simple podcast, where we make data fun. Be sure to visit ibmbigdatahub.com/podcast to access the show notes and uncover even more great episodes. Remember, the views expressed here are those of the host and its guests and do not necessarily represent the views of IBM. Until next time, over and out.